Hiya guys, how's it going? It's Since the Skeleton here. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell for more videos. Thanks! Welcome back, everyone! Today we're getting back into The Fairy's Mistake by Gail Carson Levine. Chapter 7. The Widow Pickering loved her new gown. She tried it on while Myrtle tried on her own new gown. The widow told Myrtle that she looked fantastic. Myrtle wrote that the new gown made her mother look 20 years younger. They took off the gowns and hung them up so they wouldn't wrinkle. Then Myrtle went out into the yard to experiment. She hummed softly. A line of ants pushed between her lips. She hummed louder and the ants got bigger. Even louder and the ants got even bigger. She'd had no idea that there were such big ants. They were as big as her big toe. Enough ants. Myrtle opened her mouth wide and sang, "La la la la, tra-lee, tra-la, tra-loo." Moths, fireflies, and ladybugs flew out. She hummed again. This time worms and caterpillars crawled out. So she didn't always get ants by humming. She tried speaking. "Nasty, mean, smelly, rotten, stupid, loathsome," she giggled. "Vile, putrid, scabby, mangy." They were crowding out. Crawling, flitting, slithering, darting, wriggling, whizzing, oozing, flying, marching, escaping from Myrtle's mouth every way they could. There were aphids, butterflies, mambas, lacewings, lynx spiders, midges, wolf snakes, gnats, mayflies, rhinoceros vipers, audacious jumping spiders, bandy vipers, wasps, locusts, fleas, thrips, ticks, and every other bug and spider and snake you could think of. Myrtle kept experimenting. She had a wonderful time, but she didn't figure out how to make a particular snake or insect come out. All she learned was that the louder she got, the bigger the creature that came out. After about an hour, she had worked up quite an appetite. So she and her mother went to the village to have dinner at the inn. Dinner was free because the innkeeper wanted to keep Myrtle from saying a single solitary word. The fairy Ethelinda was scandalized. During the betrothal banquet, Harold noticed that Rosella's voice was fading. He noticed because all he got were tiny gems, hardly more than shavings. So he didn't make her say much. But he did make her drink wild boar broth.
"It's the best thing for you, Tootsie,"
he said when she made a face. She gulped it down and hoped it would stay there. She picked at her string beans. "Why are your subjects so poor?" she whispered. A tiny sapphire and bits of amber fell onto the tablecloth. Harold brushed the jewels onto his hand. His betrothed was sweet, but she didn't know much. Subjects were always poor. "I wish they were richer too, Cutie Pie. Then I could tax them more." "Maybe we can help them." A pearl fell into Rosella's mashed potatoes. Harold dug it out with his fork and rinsed it off in his mulled wine.
"Honey, you'll wear yourself out talking about them. Take it easy. Relax a little."
She fell asleep over dessert. Royal servants carried her to her bedchamber, but she woke up when the 3 royal guards took their places around her bed. Then she couldn't fall back asleep. Chapter 8. Myrtle and the widow Pickering slept late the next morning. When they woke up, they strolled to the village. They stopped at the toy maker's shop for favors for the party guests. From the potter, they ordered serving platters. The butcher promised them sausages and meat pies. By noon, they had picked out everything for the party. Then they linked arms and sauntered home. The fairy Ethelinda gnashed her teeth. By morning, Rosella's throat hurt worse than ever. She thought she had a fever too, but her voice was stronger. Breakfast was wild boar steak and eggs. Before her royal ladies-in-waiting had taken 10 bites, Harold sent for her. He was waiting in the library. As soon as she went in, she became very scared. There were thousands of books, but they weren't what scared her. She liked books. There were 4 desks. that was fine too. There were a dozen upholstered leather chairs, and they looked comfortable enough. A royal manservant and a royal maid were dusting. They were all right. The frightening sight was the 15 empty chests lined up in front of one of the leather chairs. "Sweetie pie," Harold said, "am I glad to see you?" He led her to the chair behind the empty chest.
Wait till I tell you my idea.
Rosella sat down.
Did you have a good breakfast, Cuddle Bunch?
It hurt too much to talk. She shook her head. Harold was too excited to pay attention.
Good. Here's my idea. You've noticed how old and moldy this palace is?
She shook her head.
You haven't? Well, it is. The drawbridge creaks, the rooms are drafty, the cellars are full of rats. The place should be condemned.
She didn't say anything. The palace looked fine to her.
So, I had a brainstorm. You didn't know you were marrying a genius, did you?
She shook her head.
This is brilliant. Listen, we're going to build a new castle. That's my idea. Picture it. Cream-colored stone. Marble everywhere. Hundreds of fountains. Taller towers than anybody ever heard of. Crocodiles and serpents in the moat. People will travel thousands of miles to see it. Oh, you'll be famous, sweetheart.
Me? Harold caught a tiny ruby.
Yes, you. I can't build a palace on current revenues. We need your voice. The kingdom needs you. So just make sure they land in the chests. Will you, sugar?
She was silent.
I know. You're wondering how you'll ever think of things to say to fill 15 chests. That's why we're here in the library. All you have to do is read out loud. Here.
He pulled a book off the shelf.
Ooh, this looks interesting. The history of the monarchy in the kingdom of Biddle. That's us, love.
He put the book in her lap.
You can read about our family.
She didn't open it. What could he do to her if she didn't talk? He could throw her in a dungeon. She wouldn't mind if he did. Bread and water would be better than wild boar. Then again, he could chop off her head, which would hurt her throat even more than it was already hurting now.
Oh, I know you're tired, darling. But after you fill these chests, you can take a vacation. You won't have to say a word.
He got down on one knee.
Please, sweetheart. Pretty please.
He has his heart set on a new palace, Rosella thought. He'll be miserable if he doesn't get one, and it will be because of me. Rosella opened the book to the middle. I'm too kind-hearted, she thought. She started reading, trying to speak around her sore throat. The fourth son of King Burgard the Hairy weighed 7 pounds and 11 ounces at birth. He had a noodle-shaped birthmark on his left shoulder. He wailed for... A stream of jewels fell into the chest. Harold tiptoed out of the room. Rosella went on reading. The infant was named Deward. His first word, more, proved him to be... She was freezing. She looked up. The fire looked hot. Proved him to be a true royal son. His tutors reported the room was spinning. Reported that he excelled at archery, hunting. What was wrong with this book? The letters were getting bigger and smaller. The lines of print were wavy. Hunting and military... Rosella fainted and fell out of her chair. The royal manservant and royal maid rushed to the partly filled chest. They each grabbed a handful of jewels. Then the royal manservant ran to find Harold, while the royal maid used her apron to fan Rosella. "Wake up, your highness! Please wake up!" she cried. The fairy Ethelinda was appalled. This was the last straw. She had to do something. Harold was in the courtyard practicing his swordplay. She materialized in front of him. She wouldn't bother to disguise herself, hoping he'd be terrified when he saw the works. All 7 feet, 3 inches of her. Her fleshy pink wings, the shimmer in the air around her, the purple light she was always bathed in, her flashing wand.
You're a fairy, right?
Harold said when he saw her. He didn't seem frightened.
I am the fairy Ethelinda,
she said, lowering her voice to a roar. Harold grinned.
Pretty good guessing on my part, considering I've never met a fairy before.
I am the one who made the jewels come out of Rosella's mouth.
Harold almost jumped up and down. He was so excited.
That was you? Really? Say, Eth, tell me, what did my sweetie pie do to make you do it?
My name is Ethelinda.
The fairy boomed.
I rewarded her after she gave me a drink of well water.
I can do that. That's,
I'm not thirsty. Do you know that you're making poor Rosella miserable?
But she's not miserable. She's a princess. She's deliriously happy.
Ethelinda tried a different approach.
Why do you want jewels so much?
You wouldn't want them?
Not if it were making my betrothed unhappy.
How could she be unhappy? If I were in her shoes, I'd be delighted. She wouldn't be a princess today if I hadn't come along. She gets to wear a crown, she has nice gowns, royal ladies in waiting, and me.
You have to stop making her talk.
But she has to talk. That's what makes me happy.
Ethelinda raised her wand. Prince Harold was 1 second away from becoming a frog. Then she lowered it. Her self-confidence was gone. If she turned him into a frog, he might figure out a way to make it better than being a prince. She certainly didn't want to reward him the way she rewarded Myrtle. She didn't know what to do. The royal manservant who'd seen Rosella faint finally reached the courtyard. He ran to Harold. Ethelinda vanished. Myrtle's party started at 2 o'clock. The school teacher arrived first. His present was a slate and 10 boxes of colored chalk. Myrtle opened one of the boxes. She wrote on the slate in green and orange letters, "Thank you. I will let you know when I run out of chalk." The baker came next. His cake was so big that it barely fit through the cottage doorway. The icing was chocolate, the decorations were pink and blue whipped cream. The writing on top said, "Happy 14 and 6 weeks birthday, Myrtle. Please keep quiet." The whole village came. Nobody wanted to take a chance on making Myrtle mad. The guests filled the cottage, and the yard, and the yards of the surrounding cottages. The widow thanked them all for coming. Myrtle collected her presents. She smiled when anyone handed her an especially big box. The food was the finest anyone could remember. Myrtle ate so many poached quail eggs and roasted chestnuts that she almost got sick. After everybody ate, she opened her presents. There were hundreds of them. Her favorites were the framed sampler that read, "Speak to me only with thine eyes," a bouquet of mums, the music box that played Hush Little Baby, the silver quill pen engraved with the motto, "The pen is mightier than the voice," the parrot that sat on Myrtle's shoulder and repeated over and over, "Shut your trap! Shut your trap! Shut your trap!" The charm bracelet with the golden letters, SILENCE. After all the presents were opened, everybody sang, "Happy birthday." Myrtle was so thrilled that she smiled and clapped her hands. Rosella was gravely ill, and Harold was seriously frightened. Even under mounds of swan down quilts, she couldn't stop shivering. She felt as if vulture's claws were scratching at her throat, and a carpenter was hammering at her temples. The royal physician was called in to examine her. When he was finished, he told Harold that she was very sick. He said her only hope of recovery lay in bed rest and complete silence. His fee for the visit was the jewels he collected when he listened to her chest and made her say, "Ah," 16 times. Myrtle had a birthday party every week. She and the widow laughed and laughed at their silliness and wishing for jewels to come out of Myrtle's mouth. When Myrtle got bored between parties, she would speak into a big jar. Then she'd let the bugs and the snakes loose in the yard and make them race. She and her mother would have a grand time betting on the winners. Rosella got better so slowly that Ethelinda's patience snapped. The evening after Myrtle's 4th party, Ethelinda materialized as herself in the widow's cottage.
I am the fairy Ethelinda, who rewarded your sister and punished you. You have to help Rosella,
she thundered. Myrtle sneered. I do? I have to? A bull snake slithered under Ethelinda's gown. A gnat bit her wing.
Ouch!
Ethelinda yelped. Be careful, dear, the widow told Myrtle. You might make a poisonous snake.
Yes, you have to help her,
Ethelinda said,
or I'll punish you severely.
Myrtle wrote on her slate, I like your punishments.
I can take your punishment away.
As fast as she could, Myrtle wrote, What do I have to do? Ethelinda explained the problem. I can fix that, Myrtle wrote. Ethelinda transported Myrtle to the palace, where Rosella was staring up at her lace-bed canopy and wondering when her nighttime guards would arrive. As Ethelinda and Myrtle materialized, Ethelinda turned herself back into the old lady. I've brought your sister to help you, my dear, Ethelinda said. Rosella stared at them. Myrtle would never help her. Myrtle had brought her slate with her. She wrote, Change clothes with me and hide under the covers. Rosella didn't move. She wondered if she was delirious. Go ahead, do it, Ethelinda said. She won't hurt you. Rosella nodded. She put on Myrtle's silk nightdress with gold embroidery and slipped deep under the blankets. Myrtle got into Rosella's silk nightdress with silver embroidery. Myrtle climbed into Rosella's bed. She sat up and yodeled, long and loud. Yahoo! A hog-nosed snake wriggled out of her mouth. Harold heard her, even though he was at the other end of the palace. He started running, leaping, skipping toward the sound.
She's better! She's well again!
He yelled. How many jewels did that yodel make? He wondered. Ethelinda made the snake disappear. Then she made herself invisible.
Precious!
Harold said, coming through the door. He dashed to the bed.
The roses are back in your cheeks. Speak to me!
What roses?
Myrtle yelled as loud as she could.
I feel terrible!
The head of a boa constrictor filled her mouth. Harold jumped back.
Ah!
What's that? Rosella lifted a tiny corner of blanket so she could watch. The snake slithered out and wound itself around Myrtle's waist. Myrtle grinned at Harold.
Do you like him? Should I name him after you?
3 hornets flew straight at him. One of them stung him on the nose. The other 2 buzzed around his head.
Honey? What's going on? Honey pie? That's a snake! Where did the jewels go? Why are bugs and snakes coming out?
This is fun, Myrtle thought. Who'd have thought I could scare a prince? Poor Harold, Rosella thought, but it serves him right. He looked so silly. She fought back a giggle and wished she could make a bug come out of her mouth every once in a while.
I'm angry. This is what happens when I get angry.
A scorpion stuck its head out of Myrtle's mouth.
Yo! Why are you angry? At me? What did I do?
It's not so great being a princess,
Myrtle yelled.
Nobody listens to me. All they care about are the jewels. You're the worst. It's all you care about too. And I don't want to eat wild boar ever again. I hate wild boar.
The air was so thick with insects that Harold could hardly see. Snakes wriggled across the carpets. Snakes slithered up the sconces. Snakes oozed down the tapestries. A gigantic one hung from the chandelier, its head swaying slowly. A milk snake slipped under the covers. It settled its clammy body next to Rosella. She wanted to scream and run. Instead, she bit her lip and stayed very, very still.
Sweetheart, I'm sorry. Forgive me. Out! That hurt!
Myrtle screamed.
I'm not going to talk unless I want to!
All right. You won't have to. And I'll listen to you. I promise.
Something bit his foot all the way through his boot. He hopped and kicked to get rid of it.
Everyone will listen. By order of Prince Harold!
And Princess Rosella!
Myrtle yelled.
And Princess Rosella.
Harold echoed. Myrtle lowered her voice. Now leave me. I need my rest. Chapter 11. After Harold left, Ethelinda made the snakes and bugs disappear. Rosella came out from under the covers. Thank you, Rosella told her sister. An emerald fell on the counterpane. Myrtle snatched the jewel and said, You're welcome. She snagged the fly before it got to Rosella's face. Then she crushed it in her fist. You have done a good deed, Ethelinda began. Myrtle shook her head. Don't reward me. Thanks, but no thanks. She let the 2 cockroaches fall into the bed. Ethelinda asked if Myrtle would help Rosella again if she needed it. Why should I? Myrtle asked. I'll pay you, Rosella said. Myrtle pocketed 2 diamonds. Not bad. She'd get to frighten the prince again and get jewels for it too. Okay. Myrtle and Rosella switched clothes again. Then Ethelinda sent Myrtle back home. When Myrtle was gone, Ethelinda said she had to leave too. She vanished. Rosella sank back into her pillows. She didn't want Myrtle to help again, or even Ethelinda. She wanted to solve the problem of Harold and his 4 subjects all by herself. Harold didn't dare visit Rosella again that day, but he did command the royal servants to listen to her. So Rosella got rid of her nighttime guards, and she had her meal of poached quail eggs and roasted chestnuts at last. She also ordered the royal ladies-in-waiting to bring her a slate and chalk. From then on, she wrote instead of talking to them. She was tired of having them dive into her lap whenever she said anything. And she had them bring her a box with a lock and key. She kept the box and the slate by her side so she'd be ready when Harold came. He showed up a week after Myrtle's visit. Rosella felt fine by then. She was sitting at her window watching a juggler in the courtyard.
Honey?
He poked his head in. He was ready to run if the room was full of creepy crawlies. But the coast seemed clear, so he stepped in all the way. He was carrying a bouquet of daisies and a box of taffy.
All better, sweetheart?
He held the daisies in front of his face, in case any hornets started flying. He looked so scared, Rosella thought. She smiled to make him stop worrying. He lowered the bouquet cautiously and placed it on a table. Then he sat next to her and looked her over. She seemed healthy. That silk nightdress was cute. Blue was a good color for her. He hoped she wasn't feeling miserable anymore. Anyone who was going to marry him should be the happiest maiden in the kingdom. He still wanted her to talk up enough jewels for a new palace. Then after that, he wouldn't mind a golden coach and a few other items. But he wanted her to be happy too. They sat there, not saying anything.
Oh, here.
Harold finally said. He held out the bouquet and the candy. She took them. Thank you. An opal hovered on her lip and tumbled out. Harold reached for it, but Rosella was faster. She opened her box and dropped in the opal. It clinked against the stones already in there. She snapped the box shut. That was pretty selfish of her, Harold thought. He started to get mad, but then he thought of boa constrictors and hornets. He calmed down.
What's that box for, darling?
My jewels. A pearl came out this time. A big one. It went into the box too.
Honey? Sweetie pie? What are you going to do with them?
Give them away. Your subjects need them more than we do.
No, you don't!
Harold hollered. She couldn't. It was all right to give jewels away for the engagement ceremony. That was once in a lifetime, but she wanted to make a habit of it.
You can't give them away! I won't allow it!
Rosella wrote on her slate, I'm trying not to get mad.
No, don't get mad!
Harold started backing away.
But don't you want a new palace? I'll tell you what, we'll name a wing after you. It'll be the Rosella wing. How do you like that?
She shook her head. This palace is beautiful. Look at it, it's wonderful. All those gems going into the box, thought Harold. Wasted! If she gave them away, soon his subjects would be richer than he was.
Tell you what,
Harold said.
we'll split 50-50.
I won't read a million books out loud just to fill up your treasure chests. He counted as they fell. 2 diamonds, 3 bloodstones, 1 Hykenneth, and 1 turquoise. He sighed.
All right, my love.
All right, my love. 50-50. Rosella wanted to be fair. He had made her a princess, after all. They shook hands, then they kissed. Epilogue. Myrtle never had to come to her sister's rescue ever again. The 50-50 deal worked out perfectly. Harold got his new palace and golden coach, eventually. And Rosella was happy talking to her subjects and making sure they had enough plows and winter coats and leather for making shoes. Also, she built them a new school and a library and a swimming pool. In time, she and Harold grew to love each other very much. Harold even stopped trying to steal jewels from Rosella's wooden box while she was sleeping, and Rosella stopped counting them every morning when she woke up. Myrtle and her mother went into the bug and snake racing business. People came from 20 kingdoms to watch Myrtle's races. They bet beetles against spiders, or rattlers against pythons, or grasshoppers against garter snakes. The widow would call the races, and Myrtle would take the bets. The whole village got rich from the tourist trade, and Myrtle became truly popular, which annoyed her. Ethelinda grew more careful. Myrtle was the last mistake she had. Nowadays, when she punishes people, they stay punished, and when she rewards them, they don't get sick. And they all lived happily ever after. The end.